Hey all, it's Mooch. Welcome to Your Mechs, episode 15, where we talk about choosing coil resistance for a series, or what we call stacked, mechanical mod. I'm seeing more and more people use series mods recently because, well, they offer a lot of advantages, and there's some really good ones coming to market, especially in the 2700, 21700 size, where you can have incredible capacity and current ratings with something like the Samsung 30T, 3000 mAh at 35 amp rating. That's fantastic. Or the Samsung 40T, if you're not drawing quite so much current. So let's dive right in. Some of the advantages of a series mech, for those of you who are not using it, you might be thinking, well, why should I use that? I mean, it's long, it's big. What does it give me back? Well, for the same amount of power, because we have twice the voltage, we can have lower battery current, because power equals voltage times current. So you bring up the voltage, you can lower the current down for the same amount of power. That gives us more battery choices. Instead of having to use a 35 amp battery, may have lower capacity, now we can use a 20 amp or 25 amp battery that has higher capacity. We get more vaping time before we have to recharge. It also means more efficient use of the battery, and that means the battery is going to be running, since we're not pulling so much current from it, it's going to be running a little more efficiently at a slightly higher voltage. Means it's going to hit harder. That's what we're looking for with a mechanical mod. Now, some of the disadvantages of a series mech: it's heavier and bigger. You've got two batteries. Higher risks of getting into trouble. It's not inherently dangerous. 2 or 3 years ago, series mechs were, hellspawn creatures of evil. I remember the people talking about them as if they were that way. But because of the higher voltage, you can push more current through any particular short circuit or any particular problem. You have to be careful. Like with any mech, you have to be careful, but you can't get into trouble faster with a series mech because of that higher voltage. Please check the resistance of your coils. Check on a regulated mod first. Make sure everything's okay with that RDA and your coil mounting, coil placement, etc. Then transfer it to your mech. Also, as I mentioned before, many people, this is a disadvantage, use the quote wrong resistance, or not the resistance to give them what they think they should be getting or what they wanted to get. We'll dive into what that actually means, because I don't know if that made sense right now. Many vapors double the coil resistance since the voltage doubled. Basic Ohms law: if you want to keep the current the same, if you're drawing 30 amps, voltage doubles, well, you want to double the resistance so you end up with that same 30 amps. Well, yeah, that keeps the current the same. But remember, you still have double the voltage. And since power equals voltage times current, if the current's the same, but you ended up still doubling the voltage, that means you're still running at double the power level if you only double the resistance when going from a 1 battery mod to a series or stacked 2 battery series or stacked mechanical mod. You need to use 4 times the resistance if you want to start back at the same power level. If you were at 100 watts with a single battery mech, approximately, well, you have to use 4 times the resistance in a series mech to stay at that 100 watts. And we'll dive into it quick over here. Now, the goal I would expect for anybody with a series mech is, since it's bigger and heavier, well, what am I getting out of this? Well, you want a slightly hotter vape, or a much hotter vape. So let's keep that as a goal, and we'll use that down here to guide us in choosing a coil resistance. The old setup, let's assume 0.12 ohms on a single mech. Let's assume we've got a Samsung 30T, so running at a pretty good voltage, 3.7 volts. Ohms Law tells me that's going to give me 31 amps flowing. And if you run Watt's Law, that's going to give you about 115 watts. That's a decent vape for a lot of people. But you went to a series mech because you want to bump that up a bit. Now, by the rule I have over here, we will want to multiply that 0.12 ohms by 4 and get 0.48 ohms. Now, at 7.4 volts, 0.48 ohms, we're only at 15 amps, so it's half the current, but we're still at the same power level. That's the key to a series mech. At 115 watts here at 31 amps, but with a series setup, we can have that same 115 watts, but we can go all the way up to a 0.48 ohm coil and only draw 15 amps from the battery. They run cooler, they last longer, they run more efficiently, or we can use a higher capacity battery. What many vapors end up doing, though, is they say, oh, I'm at 0.12 ohms. Like I mentioned over here, they only double the resistance up to 0.24 ohms. 7.4 volts at 0.24 ohms, 31 amps. Well, that's the same for both setups. But 31 amps times the doubled voltage they're really running at 229 watts. 229 watts. That's why it seems like it hits like a goddamn freight train out of control. Because you're 229 watts, where before you're at 115 and only wanted to go a little higher. Now, maybe you're very happy with this. Well, then you can just stay there. Keep your 0.24 ohms and you're off and running. But if you want to just bump up a little bit, or even just have the same power level, you want to stay at 115 watts, except you want to run at much lower current level, 15 amps, so your batteries run more efficiently, cooler, last longer, etc. Well, then what you want to do is multiply it by that 4. So let's assume a slightly hotter vape as your goal. 0.48 gets you back to where you were with a single battery, excuse me. So 115 watts, 114 watts, it's about the same, but you want to run a little bit hotter. Drop that down to 0.4 ohms. Now, since it's 4 times what a single battery mech would do, that's the equivalent of 0.1 ohms instead of 0.12 ohms. It might not sound like a lot, but we're talking 20% differences, 15-20% difference in how much power you're using. That can add up. That can be obvious, I meant to say. If you recalculate the current, you're now at 18.5 amps, so it's still decently low compared to here, but we're running 15-20% higher power level, and you may find that's enough for what you want to do. Now, most vapors end up around 0.3 to 0.4 ohms. I'm starting off, if you're 0.12 ohm vapor before with a single battery mech, I was saying, hey, try 0.4 ohms and see what you think. With a little bit extra power that gives you, slightly hotter vape, adjust as necessary. Go up or go down from that. Most 0.3 to 0.4. Now, I realize some vape with 0.18, 0.13, even lower on a series mech. Others are up at 0.6, 0.8, 1.8 ohms. But for the majority of them, they're in the 0.3 to 0.4 range. And so I recommend starting about the high end of that and working your way down. If you don't want to do the math, that's okay. Start at 0.4, see what it feels like, adjust as necessary. Take off a wrap or use different coils, wherever it needs to give you the vape experience you're looking for, because that's what's the most important. And that's how you can use just some simple math and a couple concepts to arrive at a great starting point, or maybe right into what you end up going with for coil resistance for a series mech. Thank you for watching.